In this video, I take you on a journey that spans over 50 years, following Paul McCartney's first ever and now legendary Hofner bass guitar, from when it was first purchased to it being lost, and it now being reunited with Paul in 2023. Let's get into it.
Tell me why.
Macca got a bass. The year is 1961, and the place is the rocking German city of Hamburg. The Beatles, formed of John Lennon and George Harrison on guitar, Paul McCartney on piano and guitar, Stuart Sutcliffe on bass, and Pete Best on drums, are back for the second time to take up a gig at the Top 10 Club from April 1st to July 1st. With Stuart Sutcliffe planning on leaving, the group elects Paul as their new bass player. McCartney, however, didn't yet have a bass guitar, so, still in Hamburg, he shopped around at a music shop called Steinway Music House at 29 Kolonnaden. It was the fourth floor where McCartney saw the Hofner. His eye was drawn to the design. It seemed like, because I was left-handed, it looks less daft because it was symmetrical. It was also a great price. I couldn't afford a Fender. Fenders even then seemed to be about £100. All I could really afford was about £30. So for £30 I found this Hofner violin bass. Whilst in the shop, the store's assistant, Gunther Hopper, noted that Paul was left-handed and offered to order a specially made left-handed model for him. Some people also believe that there was a singular left-handed bass in stock at the store. However, this is unlikely, as there is no indication or proof that Hofner had previously made a left-handed 501 bass before the order of McCartney's. The catalogues also did not feature such one. Also, no existing photographs from before that time have ever been seen, and there are no claims of ownership by anyone before this time. There is also another myth that Paul bought a right-handed bass and DIY'd it into a left-handed one, but this is unlikely since it isn't really feasible without putting a whole new top onto the bass and doing a bunch of modifications. The bass in the clubs and the studio. After his order from Hofner was completed, he took the bass and ended up playing it for the duration of the Hamburg trip, officially becoming the Beatles' bass player. The first publicly available recording of the Beatles to include Paul's 501 bass is the single My Bonnie / When the Saints. This was recorded while still in Germany on the 22nd of June with Tony Sheridan. It was then released in October 1961. Once they'd finished in Hamburg, the Beatles headed back home to Liverpool, where they played many gigs at the Cavern. This is what earned the bass's iconic name as the Cavern bass. Fast forward to the first proper Beatles track that Paul's bass was on, Love Me Do / P.S. I Love You. This track was the first Beatles-only single and is what got them into the public eye. McCartney then used the bass to record the band's first 2 albums. He also played hundreds of shows with it until he retired it for a newer model in October 1963, which is the bass he still plays live today. This is because it was quite damaged and needed some repairs. It was falling to pieces. The neck pickup frame had been broken and was held together using tape. The bass gets repaired. Later on in the spring of 1964, the bass was sent off to Sound City in London for repairs. What came back was a significantly altered product. It had been resprayed in a vibrant 3-part sunburst. The 2 pickups were now mounted to a large piece of wooden housing, and the knobs were replaced with different, almost radio-esque ones. No one really knows why such significant changes were made. Perhaps it was Paul himself who requested it, or even someone on the Beatles team such as Mal Evans. Since it had been repaired, it was now once again suitable as McCartney's backup bass for live gigs and was frequently seen beside the stage on Beatles tours. Unfortunately, it was never used in recordings at the time. Its next appearance was in the 1968 Revolution promo video. Although Paul is playing it in the video, it's likely he didn't use it for that version of the recording and instead used his Rickenbacker 4001. However, it's believed for the version on the White Album called Revolution 1, he did play the good old Cavern bass. But this can't really be confirmed. Let It Be Stolen? The start of 1969 was its next appearance, with it being used in the first half of the Beatles' Get Back sessions and Let It Be film. Unfortunately, it wasn't used for any of the recordings that made it onto the Let It Be album. Then disaster struck, and the bass was accordingly stolen, with its last sighting being on January 21st, 1969, days before the band's rooftop show. For years it remained a mystery of where Paul's cherished bass had ended up. It was looking likely it would never be seen again. Over time, the story of the missing bass became a legend, became one of the most sought-after holy grails of lost instruments in rock and roll history.
Searching.
Then about 50 years after the supposed bass was stolen, in 2019, Paul McCartney was in talks with some people at Hofner since they were making him a new backup bass. He then brought up the question once again, do you know what happened to my lost bass? The one that got pinched? Lucky for McCartney, he had asked that question to the right person. Nick Voss was a Hofner executive, and he took it upon himself to kickstart a hunt for the elusive instrument with the media campaign #TraceTheBass, to try and locate and return the iconic bass to Paul McCartney. Whyyyy said at the time, "While nobody really knows what happened to the bass, it was very likely stolen. To this day, it remained a mystery. There have been rumours over the years, but that's all they amount to, just rumours. Someone somewhere knows what happened to this bass and where it is now. This information is out there, if only the right person would come forward." Then, skip ahead to 2023. Journalists Scott and Naomi Jones got involved and relaunched the campaign in September of that year with a new website called thelostbass.com and a popular article for The Telegraph. They got over 100 suggestions and 600 people offering their help. False lead. The first lead they decided to follow was from a guy who was a roadie for The Who during the time the bass was stolen. He was actually claiming that he himself stole the bass in 1969. He even had 2 witnesses to back him up, and could be seen in archived Who concert footage from when they played in West London on the 25th of January, which lines up with the possible place and date the bass could have been stolen. It was amazing how much this chap fitted the bill, Jones says. "We know he worked for The Who, we know he's stolen things, you know? We basically decided that this guy was guilty." Just as Whyyyy and the Joneses were about to get the local police involved, a new, more likely lead was formed. Get back! Ian Horn, who was a former roadie and a part of McCartney's crew in 1972 during the early days of Wings, explained that McCartney's bass had actually been stolen as well as some other gear from a van whilst parked in Notting Hill in 1972. Whyyyy explains, Ian and Trevor had been working very late, to 10 o'clock at night, and they left the van parked up in a street in London, in Notting Hill, near Ladbroke Grove, with the gear still inside. Somebody broke into the van and stole some of the gear, including the bass. This was our first clear lead. All of the information lines up with the history, since McCartney had been recording his album Red Rose Speedway at the time, and one of the studios he had worked in was Island in Notting Hill. It also lined up with information that Nick had received earlier on. When I was still doing the search through the Hofner site, I got a slightly strange email from a guy giving me a story about the lost bass he'd heard from somebody else. The story actually pinpointed a particular house in Notting Hill, Ladbroke Grove, and he said the bass had been taken from this particular address and then sold to somebody in a pub in West London. I didn't actually pay a lot of attention to it, seemed to be far-fetched, so I just archived the story. About 6 months later, we got the email from Ian Horn. Doing some more research, it turns out that this robbery had actually been documented in many newspapers, including the Daily Mirror, the Times, and the Evening Standard, all major news sources in the UK. None of these articles, however, had been put online, and they found them as clippings stored away in the British Library. Also, in case you're wondering, Paul didn't publicise it himself at the time, since he didn't want to make a big deal about it and wanted to avoid his roadies getting a bad reputation. Anyway, this was very useful information, as it confirmed what Ian Horn and the story from the other sources had suggested. It also meant that the bass was likely still in England and not hidden away by some rich collector. After reconnecting with the guy from the email, he obtained additional details. It was revealed that his father had been the one to break into the truck and subsequently sold the bass to Ronald Guess, the landlord of the Admiral Blake pub in West London. Ronald later gifted the bass to his eldest son, who tragically lost his life in a car accident. The bass then passed on to Ronald's elder brother, who ended up keeping it for the rest of his life until passing during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The wife of the older brother, still alive, was aware of an old bass stored in their loft. One day, whilst watching TV, she coincidentally stumbled upon a news segment about Paul's bass. Connecting the dots, she brought the instrument to McCartney's representatives in London. Paul was thrilled to have his bass back. However, to be on the safe side, Whyyyy visited London to confirm that it was indeed Paul's original bass and not a fake. Pretty quickly, Nick confirmed it was Macca's, due to the odd feature of this specific bass of it having a curved back, unlike any other models from any point in Hofner's history that all have flat backs. This is a detail that only McCartney could have known, since the back of the bass was never photographed. This also said to Whyyyy that this specific bass was likely a prototype and possibly the first ever left-handed Hofner. It was then announced to the public on the 13th of February 2024 via many news sites and on the Twitter by a family member of the older brother that the bass had been returned to McCartney. According to said Twitter account, "To my friends and family, I inherit this item which has been returned to Paul McCartney. Share the news." And it looks like they also plan to share their own story of what happened to the bass. The true story shall be told in time. For now, I ask for patience. What now? Paul wants it to be playable again, and so needs to fix up the bass, since it requires some repairs. Although it's in surprisingly good shape for its age, however, it being stored in a loft, the body has some splits in the wood, the pickups aren't working, Plus the control knob and switches need fixing. It also looks like at some point it was restrung as a right-handed bass with really heavy strings, causing some warping to the neck. Once it has been made playable again, people are suggesting that Paul will record with it on his new album that is coming out this year. Hopefully that's everything. Thanks for letting me take you on one of the greatest trips in rock and roll history. It truly is a miracle that Paul finally got his bass back. What are your thoughts? What do you think he should or will do with it? Let me know in the comments. Like if you liked and dislike if you didn't. Oh, and be sure to subscribe, because less than 5% of you who watch these videos are subscribed. See you in the next one. Bye, 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 bye.